All right, friends and neighbors, welcome back to another networking video. Today we are continuing our voice over IP journey part 7. And today we're going to talk about unified communications just a little bit and some of the advancements in the field. So up to this point, we've talked a lot about VoIP. We've talked about codecs, we've talked about signaling protocols, transport, all of those things. But VoIP is really just a part of the discussion, even though when we say VoIP, we might mean a whole host of other things. So VoIP tends to be a focal point, but it's really just part of today's overall communication picture. It's probably more appropriate today to talk about something called unified communications, which is really an umbrella term for, well, everything. So why do we want to talk about unified communications instead of just VoIP? Well, we have a couple of problems that we'd like to solve. First off, when you think about all the ways that you communicate with somebody else, we have a lot of different methodologies, right? We have email, we have messaging, we have voice, we have cell phones, we have computer-based applications. There's just a wide variety of methodologies or modalities to communicate with somebody. Plus, we have lots and different kinds of devices. You have your cell phone, you have PCs, we have laptops. We have all kinds of different ways to communicate. I mean, today we can even use TVs to communicate. On top of that, there are a lot of providers, but also you yourself had a number of different identities, right? You can be identified by several different email accounts, by usernames in different places. So there's lots and lots of different identities for you, lots of different locations, lots of different addresses, lots of different numbers that we could use. So this presents an interesting problem, right? What do we use and when? So what do we do about this? Well, what we'd like to do is simplify all those aspects of our communications. In addition, it'd be nice to have some way to control all of that. And so one mechanism that we use to do that is a unified portal to control all of those things. And so we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways to do that later on, but imagine that you've got one-stop shopping and you can hit everybody or receive all your communications with one interface. In addition, we want integration between all of our ways to not only send information, but also receive information. So, as my friend and colleague from years ago, Emilio Di Lorenzo, best said it, you decide how to send it and I decide how to pick it up. Now, another important idea, especially when we're talking about access to subject matter experts or SMEs, is reachability and presence, right? We want to be able to indicate somehow that we are there, available, or away. We want to be able to be reached, right? If you can't get me here, you can get me over here. And the famous joke is, well, you can get me by email, you can get me by messaging, you can send me a text, and if you can't do that, just stick your head out the office and yell for me because I'm just down the hall. So we want to be able to control our indications of reachability and presence. So I can not only decide how I want to pick it up or how I want to send it, but I can also decide what gets to me and on which device. So what's the real UC idea? Well, we can see from this nice graphic from Northern VoIP, we have lots and lots of different modalities for communication. If you've used Zoom at all, or Microsoft Teams, which we'll talk about later on, you've used many of these aspects. And even if you're using all these different individual devices or modalities and separate connections and they have no tie to each other, you've still used a lot of them and had different ways to communicate. But a big part of the push behind unified communications is collaboration, mobility, and presence. Those are the whole points. But a really, really important idea is that VoIP was sold on the idea of saving money. You didn't have to pay for line charges anymore. The amount of bandwidth that you use with VoIP didn't require all the different circuits, and we didn't have all the long distance charges or even the circuit charges. So VoIP was a massive cost savings. But when we start talking about unified communications, it's not really that central an idea. It's not about money anymore. It's about the integration of applications. It's about efficiency. It's about improvements in productivity. So the ideas are more soft, not really bottom line cost savings. So really it's about human productivity in improvements. So today, one of the big questions is, what's the best way to do this? Sometimes it's with a provider that's local. Sometimes you're going to do it yourself. Sometimes you're going to do this in the cloud. So there's a lot of tight integration between providers and your infrastructure, and then we have to decide what's the best way to migrate. So when we start to get down to brass tacks, what is UC really about? Well, we know that it is a set of very identifiable devices and applications and modalities of communication. Right? We've got call control and multimodal communication, right? So that means text and voice and all of those. We've got this need to indicate presence. We've got instant messaging, unified messaging, which means all the different kinds of straight up messages that you would get. And the list just goes on and on. So the set of tools for collaboration, indication of presence, mobility, all of these things. But another big part is business process integration, or BPI, and all of that software. So what is business process integration? Well, my favorite example is when you used to call for, say, tech support, or you want some assistance on your account or something like that. So you would call up to some call center somewhere, and then they would ask for all of your information, and then they would have to look it up themselves, and then maybe on another screen or a completely different system, they'd have a screen about your data. And then, oh, what product are we talking about? All of that. Where today, you would call into a call center, you put some information in there, and they say, oh, there you are, Mr. Hartpence. I see that you bought this particular device on this particular day. What's the problem? Now, that doesn't always mean you get a satisfactory response from tech support, but the important thing is that they have ready access to your account and your account data, the information about the products that you may have had, and can get you to a subject matter expert very, very quickly. Now, commonly, these systems have voice over IP at its heart, but really it's about all of these other features and functions. And our friends out at the Yankee Group tell us that businesses adopting UC, or Unified Communications, typically have experienced double-digit improvements in productivity. And for those playing the home game, that means that you're going to have 10% or greater improvement in efficiency, responsiveness, and all of that. And that, of course, makes customers very happy. Now, what's interesting is you can sort of follow the arc of all of our communication capabilities, right? Everything from letter writing to email to messaging, and we can think about how that changed our lives. Each one of those things changed our lives. Now think about how things like Microsoft Teams, 8x8 solutions, Zoom, Avaya, Unified Communications, Cisco, all of these companies with their offerings, how has that changed your life? How do we change the way that we do things? It's actually quite phenomenal. Every time we change our modalities, every time we change our integration for applications, it is a marked difference in how we do things and how we get things done. Sometimes much, much faster, right? Do you have time for a quick Zoom call? Oh, yep, we'll take care of that. We'll straighten that out. So it's really sort of amazing how it changes the way that we do things and sometimes the productivity improvements that we get as a result. Now, we still have to realize that all the things that we've talked about in this VoIP journey still have to go on. So examples can be, well, you're still doing video, you're still doing audio, so we need codecs. All that chat stuff, you're going to store that in a text file because it's a different kind of communication, albeit in the same interface, so kind of cool. File formats often change the encoding methods and, of course, the compression that you might be using. And applications such as Zoom or Teams can support multiple codecs, multiple file types, just depending on what you'd like to use. So it really is a really interesting change to the way that we do things, and quite a step up from traditional telephony through VoIP, through the early stages of unified communications to the way we do things today. Now, unified communications is certainly not the end of the story. Lots and lots of providers offer a unified communications solution, but each one of those features of unified communications continues to advance. The technology and the integration continues to move ahead. Codecs are a really good example. So Opus, VP8, VP9, VP10, etc., these are modifications to or improvements in the field of coder decoders. So we've talked about G.711, the H.26 series, H.264 for example, MPEG-4. But Opus and the VP series are improvements not to those codecs specifically, but improvements to the encoding of audio and the encoding of video. Opus has been standardized in 67 or RFC 6716, so you can go out and read about that. I've included a couple of links here to talk about that you can read more about VP8, VP9, and the advancements in the VP series from Google, and it is tied to the WebM project. So in addition to codec improvements, we've got protocols and apps that are continuing their development as well. So RFC 6121 and 7081 are all about the integration of some things that existed. SIP in this case is an example, and in this case the idea is that there's the extensible messaging and presence protocol integration with SIP to indicate things like SIP addresses of record, which is a tighter integration with DNS. So this is an improvement. So we're used to looking at DNS records, and we're looking at address records or MX records and things like that, but now we're going to add SIP addresses of record too. XMPP is all about extensions that provide data exchange between a wider variety of applications or data types. So in this case, we're talking about instant messaging and presence functionality into or as additions to the previous features. WebRTC is about the support for voice and video and data into an application that may not previously have had it. So advancements or developments across the board. Now the RFCs date from 2011 and 2013, so it's not clear how much advancement has been going on in those particular projects. But in the case of WebRTC, you can actually take a look at the repositories and see that as at the time of this recording, that there was movement in those repositories just hours ago. So lots of these projects are alive and well and still pushing forward. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that your browsers support a lot of these wrappers, protocols, and codecs. So things like Chrome and Opera already have the integration. So you can look for extensions to see how you might utilize them yourself. So lots going on with VoIP and UC. So what we see is that even today we have constant improvements in tools, interfaces, protocols, and codecs. Who knows, there may be a time when we don't use the ITUT series of codecs at all. Now don't forget that a big part of this was not about the money, but efficiency, human productivity, and business process integration. Well, that brings us sort of up to date and maybe to the end of our VoIP journey. Thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if I helped. And no matter how you choose to get to me, or I choose to pick it up, may those packets always reach their destinations.